I stood in the empty community hall staring at chairs arranged for a crowd that never arrived. My board member, Uncle, panned his camera, laughing as he announced, "Ladies and gentlemen, a graduation with 0 guests." Then my phone buzzed. It was a bank alert that froze my blood. They had not just abandoned me on my most important day. They had used my identity to sign a debt that could destroy me in 24 hours. My name is Ava Thompson. I am 34 years old. Today I stood in the center of the multi-purpose room I had rented at Pinewood Estates Community Center, staring at dust motes dancing in the shaft of light from the single narrow window. I adjusted the sash on my gown. I smoothed the velvet trim of my master's hood. I checked my watch for the 15th time in 10 minutes. It was 2:30 in the afternoon. The ceremony had ended exactly 1 hour and 45 minutes ago. The room smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. I knew the smell of the coffee intimately because I was the one who had brewed it. I was the one who had bought the large urn from a discount store 3 days ago. I was the one who had arranged the platter of cookies that were now softening in the humid air. I was the one who had lined up 50 folding chairs in perfect military rows. 50 chairs. 0 people. The silence in the room was not peaceful. It was aggressive. It hummed with the low, monotonous drone of the industrial air conditioning unit overhead. It amplified the sound of my own breathing and the terrified beating of my heart. I walked to the front of the room where I had taped a banner to the wall. It read, "Congratulations, Ava," in generic gold lettering. One corner of the tape had given way, and the banner hung lopsided, drooping like a tired eyelid. I reached up and pressed the tape back against the painted cinder block. Peeled away again 2 seconds later. I turned around and looked at the empty chairs. They are just late, I told myself. The traffic on the interstate is terrible on Fridays. Maybe President Kensington took a wrong turn. She always refuses to use the GPS. Maybe her husband is trying to fix his hair in the car visor mirror and made them stop. Tyler is probably hung over and moving slow. But he would not miss this. Not this. I walked to the table and poured myself a cup of coffee. It was lukewarm. I took a sip and felt the bitterness coat my tongue. I needed the caffeine to fight off the exhaustion that had been clinging to my bones for the last 2 years of night classes and double shifts. I had worked full-time while earning this degree. I had paid every cent of the tuition myself. I had studied in the break room at work. I had written papers at 3 in the morning. I had done it all for this moment. The door at the far end of the hall creaked. My heart leaped into my throat. I put the coffee cup down so hard some of it splashed onto the white paper tablecloth. I smoothed my hair. I put on the smile I had been practicing in the bathroom mirror. The smile that said I was happy, grateful, and successful. But it wasn't the board. It wasn't President Kensington or her husband. It wasn't Tyler. It was Uncle Dale. Dale was the board secretary, a man who wore suits that were always one size too shiny and cologne that arrived 5 minutes before he did. He pushed the door open with his shoulder, his eyes glued to the screen of his smartphone. He was holding the phone horizontally, his elbows tucked in, panning the device across the room with the slow, deliberate movement of a cinematographer filming a tragedy. "Uncle Dale," I said, my voice cracking slightly. "You made it." He didn't look at me. He didn't lower the phone. He kept the lens focused on the empty chairs. He walked slowly down the center aisle, capturing the void. He panned over the untouched cookies. He zoomed in on the lopsided banner. Then he turned the camera toward me. I stood there in my regalia, clutching my diploma holder, trying to maintain the smile that now felt like a mask stapled to my face. I wanted him to hug me. I wanted him to say congratulations. I wanted him to tell me that everyone else was parking the car and would be here in 2 minutes instead. Uncle Dale cleared his throat. He put on his broadcasting voice, a deep fake baritone he used when he was trying to sound important. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said to the recording. "A graduation with 0 guests," he chuckled. It was a dry scratching sound. 0 guests, he repeated, panning back to the empty room for dramatic effect. Sad scene here at Pinewood Estates. Very sad. The humiliation hit me like a physical blow to the stomach. He was not here to celebrate. He was here to document the failure. He was hunting for content. He was looking for a viral moment of pathetic sadness that he could post to the HOA Facebook group for his 300 followers. Is President Kensington with you? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Dale finally lowered the phone, but he didn't stop recording. He just held it at chest level. Your president? No. Haven't seen Pat all day. But they said they were coming. They promised. Plans change. Eva. You know how President Kensington is. He looked around the room unimpressed. Is there any alcohol or just this brown water? He gestured to the coffee. I felt the tears pricking the corners of my eyes. Hot and sharp. I refused to let them fall. Not in front of his camera. Not in front of the empty chairs. Then my phone buzzed against my hip. I grabbed it, desperate for an explanation. A flat tire, a medical emergency, anything that would make this abandonment make sense. Anything that would prove I wasn't worthless to the board. The screen lit up with 3 notifications. The first was a text from President Kensington. Don't be mad at us, dear. Something came up with the new community initiative. We are so proud of you though. No explanation. Just something came up. The second was a text from her husband. Forgot my wallet at the house. Can you cover the thing for me? I will pay you back Tuesday. Cover the thing? What thing? He wasn't even here. The third notification was from my bank. I frowned, tapping the screen. It was a fraud alert asking me to verify a transaction. My fingers trembled as I unlocked the app. I stared at the numbers. $3,250. The merchant name was Lakeside Event Catering. I blinked, trying to make the numbers change. $3,000. I didn't spend $3,000. This room cost $200 to rent. The coffee and cookies cost $40. I hadn't hired a caterer. I hadn't been to a lakeside venue. Then the fourth message arrived. It was from Tyler, the Golden Boy vice president's son. It was a photo. Tyler was standing in the backyard of the Kensington mansion. I recognized it but had never been invited inside. It was the new appreciation party setup he had been bragging about for months. The house he said he secured with his shrewd HOA networking. In the photo, strings of Edison bulbs glowed warmly overhead. There were tables covered in white linens. There were trays of shrimp cocktail and carved beef. There was champagne. And there were the entire board. President Kensington was laughing, holding a glass of wine, her head thrown back. Her husband was clapping Tyler on the back, beaming with a pride I had never seen directed at me. They weren't in traffic. They weren't lost. They weren't stuck in a crisis. They were at a party. I looked at the caption under Tyler's photo. 2 words, board first. The air left my lungs. The room at Pinewood Estates didn't just feel empty anymore. Felt like a vacuum. Board first. They were celebrating. They were having an HOA appreciation gala on the exact day at the exact time of my graduation, and they were paying for it with my money. My hands started to shake so violently I almost dropped the phone. The $3,000 charge to Lakeside Event Catering. That was the food in the picture. That was the champagne in President Kensington's hand. That was the setup in Tyler's backyard. Hey, Uncle Dale said, wandering back toward me. The phone still pointed at my face. Why the long face? Kiddo, smile for the camera. Tell the folks how it feels to be a master of arts. Business. I corrected automatically, my voice hollow. Master of Business Administration. Whatever, Dale said. Look, I'm going to head out. Tyler sent me the address for his thing. You coming? He knew. He knew they were there. He had come here first just to get the footage of the sad resident before going to the real party. I couldn't speak. I looked down at my phone again. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the coffee urn through the window, but I was Ava. I was the good one. I was the reliable one. I was the one who didn't make scenes. Don't be mad, the president had said. My thumb hovered over the banking app. I watched the pending transaction. $3,250. That was my rent for 2 months. That was the money I had saved to move out of my studio apartment. But the phone wasn't done with me yet. It buzzed one more time. A long sustained vibration that felt like a warning shot. I looked at the screen. It wasn't a text. It wasn't a transaction alert. It was a security notification from Identity Guard. The service I had signed up for years ago and almost forgot about. Critical alert. New credit inquiry detected. I tapped the notification. My breath hitched in a painful gasp. An application for a personal loan in the amount of $50,000 has been initiated at First National Bank. If this was not you, please contact us immediately. $50,000. I looked up. The fluorescent lights seemed to sear my retinas. Uncle Dale was at the door, his hand on the push bar. See you, Eva, he called out, not looking back. Congrats and all that. The door slammed shut. The echo bounced off the 50 chairs. I stood there paralyzed. My brain tried to process the timeline. The board was at a party funded by my credit card. Tyler was celebrating a new community initiative. And someone just minutes ago had used my social security number to apply for a loan worth more than my annual salary. I looked at the photo of Tyler again. The caption board first blurred before my eyes. It wasn't just that they didn't care. It wasn't just that they were selfish. I realized then with a clarity that was colder than the air conditioning that I wasn't a resident to them. I wasn't a neighbor. I wasn't a person with dreams and feelings who had just achieved something massive. I was an asset. I was a credit score to be harvested. I was a resource to be drained. I was a wallet with a heartbeat, and they had decided to empty me out while I was busy wearing a cap and gown. I looked at the bank app. The charge was still pending. I looked at the credit inquiry. It was timed 4 minutes ago. My finger hovered over the call bank button. President Kensington's voice echoed in my head. The voice that had trained me for 3 decades to be compliant, to be quiet, to never cause trouble. Don't be mad. We are the board. I looked at the empty chairs one last time. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of the coffee I had brewed for ghosts. I didn't cry. The time for crying had passed about 5 minutes ago. Now was the time for accounting. I pressed the button on the screen. The dial tone rang in my ear loud and clear in the empty room. Yes, I whispered to the silence. This is Ava Thompson. I need to report a theft. Growing up in the steel-gray winters of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, I learned early on that there are 2 types of residents in an HOA. There are the residents who are the foundation, buried deep in the dirt to hold the structure up. And there are the residents who are the spire designed to catch the light and look beautiful against the skyline. I was the foundation. Tyler was the spire. President Kensington had a favorite phrase for me. She would clap a heavy hand on my shoulder after I had fixed yet another compliance violation or paid an extra special assessment and say that Ava is strong. It sounded like a compliment when I was new. It felt like a badge of honor when I was still trying to fit in. By the time I was 30, I realized it was not a compliment. It was a disclaimer. It was her way of saying that I did not need care. I did not need worry, and most importantly, I did not need resources. Strong things do not break, so you do not need to wrap them in bubble wrap. Tyler, on the other hand, was fragile. Tyler was special. Tyler had potential. The president's husband had a different phrase for me. Whenever I pointed out that Tyler had eaten my share of the community barbecue or that Tyler had broken the common area rules and lied about it, he would sigh the sigh of a martyr and tell me that I was understanding. You are so understanding, Ava, he would say. It took me 3 decades to translate that sentence. It actually meant, You are going to let this happen and you are going to keep your mouth shut because it is easier for the board if you do not make a scene. This dynamic did not change when I became a full member. It simply became more expensive. While I spent my 20s grinding through entry-level jobs and saving every quarter for grad school and HOA dues, Tyler treated his role like a buffet where nothing looked appetizing enough to put on his plate. He was going to be the next HOA treasurer. Then he was going to launch a luxury landscaping brand. He changed visions the way normal people change socks. But he never actually quit. He was always transitioning. He was always on the verge of something massive. I meanwhile landed a job at Northbridge Compliance Group. It was not glamorous. It was not the kind of job you brag about at block parties. I spent my days auditing internal processes for mid-sized corporations, ensuring that policies were followed, that paper trails were clean, and that mistakes were rectified before the federal government got involved. I was good at it. I was excellent at cleaning up messes. I was precise. I was reliable. I was the person you called when the numbers did not add up and you needed someone to stay until 9 in the evening to find the missing 4 cents. It is a rich irony that I spent 40 hours a week detecting fraud for strangers. Yet I could not see the embezzlement happening right under the HOA covenants. It started with the small things, the kind of things that make you feel petty if you refuse. I remember a Tuesday night 3 years ago. I had just paid my own student loan bill and was eating instant ramen to make my budget work while still paying the special assessment for the new entrance sign. My phone rang. It was President Kensington. Her voice was tight, high-pitched, the voice she used when she wanted to bypass my logic centers and go straight for my guilt. The electric company sent a final notice for the common area lights. She said, "Your president forgot to mail the check and now they are saying they will cut the power by 5. It is just a misunderstanding, Eva. But the system takes 2 days to process a check and we need to pay online right now." "How much is it?" I asked. $240, she said. $240 was my grocery budget for the month. I hesitated. I told her I was tight on cash. There was a silence on the line. A heavy, disappointed silence. Then she said the magic words. "Oh, I understand. We will just light candles. I just thought since you have that steady corporate job now, you might want to help the board out of a bind. But do not worry. We will figure it out." I paid the bill within 3 minutes. Then there was the time Tyler needed a rental car for an important HOA networking event in Philadelphia. His own car, a terrifying sedan that leaked oil like a wounded animal, could not make the trip. "I just need a rental for 2 days. Tyler told me, his eyes wide and earnest. "I do not have a credit card that works for the deposit." "Come on, Eva. This is the big one. Once I get this signing bonus, I am buying you a spa day. Seriously." I put my card down for the rental. He did not get the job. He told me the interviewer was threatened by his vision. He also returned the car with an empty gas tank and a $50 late fee because he decided to stay an extra day to network at a bar in Center City. When I showed the receipt to the president asking for reimbursement for the gas and the late fee, she waved her hand dismissively. "The boy is trying, Eva. He is out there pounding the pavement for the good of the community. Why do you have to kick him when he is down?" I looked at her husband. He gave me a sad smile and patted my hand. "Don't be calculating, honey. The board isn't a spreadsheet. Don't be calculating." That was the weapon that cut the deepest. It implied that by keeping track of what was mine, I was being cold. It implied that my desire for fairness was a character flaw. It turned my generosity into an obligation and my boundaries into insults. So I stopped asking. I absorbed the cost of the broken iPhones that Tyler needed to fix so recruiters could call him. I absorbed the cost of the groceries I bought for Sunday board meetings that they forgot to reimburse. I absorbed the cost of the emergency plane ticket when Tyler met a girl online in Florida and it did not work out. I told myself I was doing it because I was the good resident. I was the responsible Thompson. But the truth, The ugly truth that I usually kept tucked away in the back of my mind was that I was buying a ticket to a show that I hoped would one day have a happy ending. I thought that if I solved enough compliance problems, if I paid enough special assessments, if I was enough of a safety net, eventually they would look at me and say, "Thank you." I pinned all that hope on my graduation. The Master of Business Administration was not just a degree to me. It was a line in the sand. It was the moment I would transition from Ava the helper to Ava the success. I convinced myself that once I walked across that stage, once I had the credentials and the authority, the dynamic would shift. They would respect me. They would stop seeing me as a resource and start seeing me as a peer. I imagined the scene 1,000 times. We would be at the community barbecue. President Kensington would raise a glass of champagne, one that I did not pay for, and say to Ava, "We are so proud of what you built." Tyler would shake my hand and say, "You really did it, neighbor." That hope was a thin thread. It was delicate and shimmering, and I held on to it with white-knuckle desperation. It was the only thing that made the late-night studying worthwhile. It was the only thing that made the unpaid dues bearable. I thought the thread was holding us together. I did not realize that while I was holding one end, pulling with all my might to keep us connected, they had not just let go of the other end. They were using the slack to tie a noose. I sat in my apartment the night before graduation, ironing my gown. I had sent them the directions 3 times. I had sent them the parking passes I paid $20 each for. I had confirmed the time. "We will be there with bells on." The president had texted. "Can't wait to scream your name," Tyler had said. I looked at those messages and felt a warmth in my chest. I thought, this is it. Tomorrow, everything changes. And I was right. Everything did change, just not the way I thought it would. Standing in that empty room at Pinewood Estates, looking at the charges racking up on my phone, I realized the thread had not snapped today. It had not snapped when they didn't show up. It hadn't even snapped when Tyler posted that photo. I realized with a cold, creeping horror that I was the only one who had ever seen the thread. To them, there was no connection to break. There was only a supply line. And you do not thank a supply line. You do not celebrate a supply line. You use it until it runs dry. And then you look for a new source. I thought about the rental car. I thought about the electric bill. I thought about the hundreds of times I had swallowed my anger because I wanted to be understanding. I looked at the credit inquiry notification again.
$52,000.
This was not a mistake. This was not a slip-up. This was an escalation. They had decided that since I was graduating, since I was moving up in the world, my capacity to be harvested had increased. They were not celebrating my success. They were leveraging it. I closed my eyes and let out a breath that shook my entire body. The girl who wanted to be good. The girl who wanted to be strong. The girl who wanted to be understanding. She died in that hallway. I do not know who cut the thread of hope I had been holding for 34 years. But as I stared at the screen of my phone, I knew one thing for certain. I was not going to be the one to tie it back together. I sat down on the edge of the low stage, the hardwood pressing against my thighs. The call to the bank was over, but the silence it left behind was louder than the dial tone. My phone, still clutched in my hand like a lifeline that had turned into a snake, vibrated again. I looked down. The screen was a glowing rectangle of misery in the dimming afternoon light. I opened the message from President Kensington first. I needed to see it. I needed to see the words arranged on the screen to believe that she had actually typed them. "We are at Tyler's appreciation gala." The message read. It was a last-minute surprise for him. "Everyone is here. Don't be mad. Eva, you know how sensitive he is about his milestones. We can celebrate your school thing next week. Don't make a scene." I stared at the phrase "your school thing." 2 years of night classes, 2 years of missing weekends, of declining invitations, of drinking cheap coffee and eating stale bagels so I could pay the tuition, a master of business administration. And to her, it was just your school thing, a hobby, a little project that could be pushed to next week, like a laundry day. And then the kicker, don't make a scene. I looked around the room. 50 empty chairs, a lopsided banner, a cold urn of coffee. There was no one here to witness a scene, even if I wanted to make one. I was alone in a room that smelled of floor wax and rejection. She was commanding me to be silent in a vacuum. The next message was from her husband. Catering used your card. He wrote, Tyler's limit was maxed out and the guy wouldn't take a check. It is just a few thousand. We will sort it out later. Have a drink on us. Just a few thousand. The words floated on the screen, detached from reality. To Frank Kensington. A few thousand was a concept, a number on a piece of paper that someone else always handled. To me, that was 4 months of aggressive saving. That was the transmission repair I had put off. That was the dental work I had delayed. Have a drink on us. I looked at the lukewarm coffee. I felt a laugh bubbling up in my throat, but it tasted like bile. They were buying me a drink with my own money while they drank top-shelf liquor I had inadvertently purchased. I set the phone down on the stage next to me. I needed to stop looking at it, but the notifications kept coming. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion. You want to look away, but the horror is magnetic. My thumb hovered over the Instagram icon. I knew I shouldn't. I knew it would be self-harm in digital form, but I had to know. I had to see what was more important than the culmination of my academic career. I tapped the icon. Tyler's profile was the first bubble in my feed. The ring around his picture was a gradient of pink and orange, signaling a new story. I tapped it. The screen filled with light and noise. The video was shaky, filmed in portrait mode. It panned across a backyard that looked like a magazine spread. There were string lights zigzagging overhead, casting a golden glow on the crowd. I saw board members I hadn't seen in a year. Then the camera landed on the food table. My stomach twisted. It was a spread fit for a wedding. Towers of shrimp on ice, platters of sliced beef tenderloin, a chocolate fountain, bottles of Veuve Clicquot chilling in silver buckets, lakeside event catering. The charge had said $3,000. I watched as the president reached into the frame and grabbed a skewer of shrimp. She was laughing, her face flushed with good wine and the proximity to her golden son. She looked happy. She looked lighter than she had looked in years. The video cut to the next segment. Tyler was standing on a chair holding a glass of champagne high in the air. He was wearing a suit that I knew cost more than my car. He looked handsome, charismatic, and completely unbothered. To the people who make it happen, Tyler shouted in the video, his voice distorted by the microphone. To the board is the only capital that matters. The crowd cheered. President Kensington was in the front row, clapping so hard her wine splashed over the rim of her glass. She was beaming up at him with a look of adoration that I had spent 34 years trying to earn and failing. I felt a tear slide down my cheek. It was cold. I scrolled down to the comment section. I don't know why. Maybe I was looking for someone to ask, "Where is Ava?" There were heart emojis. There were fire emojis. There were comments saying, "Congrats, bro," and big moves. And then there was a comment from a user named JDog8, one of Tyler's frat brothers from his third attempt at college. "Bro, your resident paid for the spread legend." The world stopped. I read it again. "Bro, your resident paid legend." I felt the blood drain from my face. My hands went numb. This wasn't just the board using my card in an emergency because the caterer wouldn't take a check. That was the lie. The truth was in the comment section. Tyler had bragged about it. He had told his friends. It was a flex. It was a joke. Ava paid. Ava always pays. Getting your neighbor to bankroll your party while she sits alone in a graduation hall wasn't shameful to them. It was legendary. It was a status symbol of his dominance and my submission. I grabbed the phone and dialed President Kensington. It rang once, twice, 3 times. I imagined her looking at the screen, seeing the name Ava and rolling her eyes. She is calling to complain. She would think she is calling to ruin the mood. The call went to voicemail. I dialed her husband. He answered on the second ring, but he didn't say hello. I heard the roar of the party in the background, the bass of a pop song thumping against the speaker. Eva, he shouted. Can't hear you. It's loud. Frank, I said, my voice trembling with a rage I had never let them hear before. Did you know what? He yelled. Look, honey, we are in the middle of a toast. Tyler is giving a speech. I will call you tomorrow. Okay. Love you. The line went dead. Love you. He said it like a reflex. He said it like a punctuation mark. It meant nothing. I lowered the phone. The screen went black, reflecting my own face back at me. I looked pale, small, and pathetic in the reflection of the device that had just delivered the news of my own insignificance. I sat there for a long time. The air conditioner hummed. The silence of the hall pressed against my eardrums. Why? Why did they do this? How could they be this cruel? And then the answer came to me. Simple and devastating. They did it because they knew I would take it. They calculated the risk and the risk was 0. They knew Ava. Ava is the one who sighs and pays the bill. Ava is the one who says it's okay when it is not okay. Ava is the compliance officer who follows the rules. And the first rule of the Pinewood Estates board is that Tyler gets the glory and Ava gets the invoice. They weren't afraid of my anger because they didn't believe it existed. They thought I was infinite. They thought I was a resource that replenished itself like a well. I unlocked my phone again. I went back to Tyler's story. I needed to see it one more time. I needed to etch the image of their betrayal into my retinas so I would never ever forget how this felt. I watched the video of Tyler on the chair again. To the board, he shouted. I watched the camera pan across the crowd and then I saw it. It was a small detail, something I had missed the first time because I was too focused on the president. In the corner of the frame, sitting on a high-top table next to the shrimp platter, was a phone. It was propped up against a bucket of ice. The screen was facing the camera for a split second before the operator panned away. On the screen of that propped-up phone was a live video feed. It was a wide shot of a room with white cinderblock walls. There were rows of empty folding chairs. There was a lopsided banner and there was a woman in a black graduation gown sitting on the edge of the stage, her head in her hands. It was me. My breath hitched. I looked around the empty hall, my eyes scanning the perimeter. Uncle Dale. He hadn't left. Or rather, he had left, but he hadn't stopped broadcasting. I remembered him holding his phone horizontally. I remembered him walking out. He must have set up a stream before he left. Or maybe he was still lurking in the hallway. Or maybe he had just recorded a long enough clip to loop it. No. I looked closer at the video on the screen within the screen. The woman in the video moved. She shifted her weight. I looked at the back of the room. High up on a shelf near the entrance, half hidden by a stack of extra chairs, was a small black shape, a phone. Uncle Dale had left his backup phone. He was live-streaming me. He wasn't filming the empty room to document my sadness for posterity. He wasn't filming it for me. He was live-streaming the empty graduation to the party. I was the entertainment. I was the juxtaposition. They were watching me sit in the dark alone and miserable to enhance the brightness of their celebration. Look at poor Ava. They were probably saying, look how sad it is. Thank God we are here at the fun party. It was a joke. My isolation was the punchline to their joy. A coldness settled over me that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. It started in my chest and spread to my fingertips. It was a clarifying freeze. It froze the tears that were threatening to fall. It froze the quivering of my lip. It froze the part of my heart that still wanted to please them. I stood up. I walked down the center aisle, my heels clicking sharply on the linoleum. Clack, clack, clack. I walked straight to the back of the room to the shelf where the phone was perched. I looked into the lens. I saw the little red light blinking. I didn't smash it. I didn't turn it off. I looked right into the camera, knowing that miles away, in a backyard full of lights and stolen champagne, they might be watching. I smiled. It wasn't the smile I had practiced in the mirror. It wasn't the smile of the good resident. It was a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Then I reached into my pocket and pulled out my own phone. I opened my banking app. I opened the credit freezing service. They were watching me. Good, because the show was just getting started. I turned around and walked out of the hall, leaving the lights on, leaving the coffee to rot, and leaving the ghost of the girl they thought they knew sitting on those empty chairs. I had work to do. I unlocked the door to my apartment and stepped inside. The air was still and smelled faintly of lemon polish, a stark contrast to the stale coffee and deception I had left behind at the community center. I did not turn on the main lights. I did not take off my graduation gown immediately. I walked straight to my desk, opened my laptop, and turned on my printer. The machine whirred to life, a mechanical soldier ready for duty. I needed to see it. I could not rely on the flashing notifications on a small phone screen anymore. I needed the physical weight of the truth. I logged into every single financial account I owned. Checking, savings, credit cards, Venmo, PayPal. The retirement fund I had started with my first paycheck. I hit print for the next 20 minutes. The only sound in the apartment was the rhythmic chug-sh of the printer spitting out paper. When the tray was full, I grabbed the stack and moved to the living room floor. I pushed the coffee table aside. I spread the papers out like a general laying out a map of a war zone. It was a map. It was a topographical map of my own exploitation. I looked at the sea of numbers, dates, and merchant names. My head started to swim. I needed a second pair of eyes. Not just any eyes. I needed eyes that could see through emotional fog and look strictly at the math. I picked up my phone and dialed neighbor Marlene. Marlene was the president's older sister, but she might as well have been from a different species. While Pat was loud, impulsive, and allergic to accountability, Marlene was a retired forensic accountant who treated feelings like unnecessary variables in an equation. She lived 3 blocks away in a townhouse that was as organized as a surgical suite. Eva. Her voice was crisp. I thought you were at your ceremony. I said. My voice was steady, which surprised me. It's over. No one came. I need you to come over. Bring your calculator. She did not ask why. She did not ask where the board was. She paused for exactly 2 seconds. I will be there in 10 minutes. When she arrived, she didn't hug me. She took one look at my face, then at the graduation gown I had thrown onto the sofa, and finally at the ocean of paper on the floor. She set her purse down, took out a pair of thick-rimmed reading glasses, and sat down cross-legged on the rug. Walk me through it, she said. We started with the checking account. I handed her a highlighter. I noticed a pattern when I was looking at the catering charge. I said, pointing to a transaction from 3 months ago. Look at this. $200 transferred to the president. The memo says groundskeeping. Husband forgot wallet. Marlene looked at the date. February 14th. I pulled up Tyler's Instagram archive on my iPad. I scrolled back to February 14th. There was a picture of Tyler and a girl he was dating at the time sitting at a steakhouse. The caption read, Valentine's dinner with my queen, treating her right. The steakhouse is not groundskeeping, Marlene noted dryly. Keep going, I said. We found a transfer for $450 labeled emergency fence repair sent to the president. The date was April 2nd. I checked Tyler's feed. April 2nd was the day he posted a photo of new limited edition sneakers. Got the grails. The caption said, "Investment pieces. He is walking on your fence repairs," Marlene muttered. We worked for 2 hours. The sun went down and the only light came from the street lamps outside filtering through the blinds. The map on the floor began to turn red as Marlene highlighted every suspicious transaction. It wasn't just random mooching. It was systemic. It was a cycle. "Look at the dates, Eva," Marlene said, tapping the paper with the end of her pen. "Every time you get paid, within 48 hours, there is a crisis. A flat tire on the common area mower, a lost bill, a medical copay for the welcome sign. They have your pay schedule memorized better than you do." I felt a wave of nausea. She was right. I had been conditioned to expect a crisis every 2 weeks, right when I was most liquid. "But that is just the small stuff," I said. "Look at the credit card statements." I pushed the stack of Visa bills toward her. These were the cards I had added the president to as an authorized user 5 years ago, strictly for emergencies. Department stores, Marlene. Electronics, liquor stores, Eva. Why is there a recurring subscription for a premium sports streaming package? I don't even watch sports. I whispered. "Tyler does," she said. She circled the charge. "You have been paying for him to watch football for 3 years. But the real horror was waiting in the credit report. I had pulled the full detailed report from the bureau after the alert at the ceremony. I laid the thick document in the center of the circle. "Here," I pointed to the inquiry section. "The notification I got today. $50,000 personal loan application." Marlene leaned in, her eyes narrowing behind her glasses. She traced the line with her finger. "Applicant Ava Thompson," she read. "Social Security number yours. Date of birth. Yours." She stopped. Her finger hovered over the address field. "Address," she read slowly. 42 Maple Drive. The room went silent. 42 Maple Drive was the Kensington mansion. Why would they put their address? I asked, though a sick feeling in my gut told me I already knew. Marlene took off her glasses and looked at me. Her eyes were hard, devoid of the pity I didn't want. "So that the mail goes to them," she said. "The approval letter, the credit card, the statements. If it came here to your apartment, you would see it. You would cancel it. If it goes to Maple Drive, they can intercept it. They can activate the loan, spend the money, and make the minimum payments or not pay at all. And you would not know until a collection agency called you." She leaned forward, her voice dropping an octave. "Eva, listen to me. Using your card to buy shrimp is theft. Guilt-tripping you into paying for sneakers is manipulation. But this," she tapped the credit report, "applying for a loan in your name and diverting the mail. This is federal fraud. This is identity theft. Identity theft." The words hung in the air like smoke. My own board president, her husband, her son. "There is more," I said. My hands were shaking, but I forced them to move. I opened my laptop again. After I saw the loan inquiry, I started thinking about the house, Tyler's new addition to the mansion, the one they are partying in right now. What about it? Tyler has bad credit. He has been evicted twice. No landlord in this city would rent to him without a cosigner or a massive deposit. He told me he handled it with a business partner. I navigated to my email trash folder. I had a hunch, terrible, nagging hunch. "A few weeks ago," I said, my voice sounding hollow, "the president came over. She said her printer was broken and she needed to print a recipe for the potluck. She asked to use my laptop. I was cooking dinner. I unlocked it for her and went back to the kitchen. I found it deep in the deleted items folder, buried under spam and newsletters, an email from DocuSign. Subject: Completed lease agreement, 1500 River Road. I clicked it open. Marlene leaned over my shoulder. We stared at the screen. It was a lease agreement for the new community pavilion with the string lights. The tenant listed was Tyler Kensington, but the co-signer, the person guaranteeing the rent, the person responsible for the security deposit and any damages was Ava Thompson. And at the bottom of the page, there was my electronic signature. I didn't sign this, I said. I never saw this document. The president did. Marlene said. She sat at your desk while you were cooking her dinner, and she opened your email. She used your credentials to verify the signature. Then she deleted the confirmation email to cover her tracks. I remembered that night. I remembered the president coming into the kitchen smiling, thanking me for the use of the computer. She had hugged me. She had said, "You are such a good resident." She had been hugging the victim she had just defrauded. She committed forgery. Marlene said to get Tyler a pavilion. I sat back, leaning against the sofa. The tears were gone. The shock was gone. What was left was a clarity so sharp it felt like it could cut glass. They didn't just not care about me. They were actively cannibalizing me. To them, I wasn't a person. I was a resource to be mined. I was the host. And they were the parasites. And they had gotten greedy. They had stopped just taking small bites and had started trying to consume the whole organ. What do you want to do? Marlene asked. She didn't tell me what to do. She asked. It was the first time in my life a neighbor had treated me like an autonomous adult capable of making a decision. I looked at the pile of papers. The map was complete. I could see every road, every trap, every extraction point. I want to close the mine, I said. Marlene nodded once approvingly. We can dispute the charges. We can file a police report for the identity theft. But you know what that means? Once you file that report, there is no going back. It becomes a criminal matter. I know, I said. They will say you are ruining the board. She warned. They will say you are overreacting. They will say you are sending Tyler to jail. I looked at the screen at the forged signature that bound me to a pavilion I wasn't invited to enter. They ruined the board when they stole my name, I said. I am just correcting the paperwork. I reached for a fresh file folder. I began to gather the highlighted statements, the credit report, and the printout of the forged lease. I am done talking to them, I said, stacking the papers into a neat, sharp-edged pile. I tried to talk to them today. I called them. I texted them. They didn't listen. They never listened to Ava, the resident. I handed the folder to Marlene. From now on, I said, they are going to have to listen to Ava, the plaintiff. Marlene took the folder. A small, terrifying smile touched her lips. Get your coat, Ava, she said. We have a lot of work to do before Monday morning. I stood up. I walked over to the trash can and threw my graduation cap inside. I didn't need the tassel anymore. I had a new job now. I wasn't an MBA graduate anymore. I was the head of the investigation. The transformation from victim to plaintiff did not happen with a scream or a dramatic breaking of glass. It happened with the quiet, rhythmic clicking of a keyboard and the dull thud of a rubber stamp. Marlene and I did not sleep that night. We turned my living room into a war room, or perhaps more accurately, a sterile recovery unit. The first step was to cauterize the wound. That meant cutting off the blood supply. I opened a new checking account at a bank on the other side of the city, a bank that had no branches near the Kensington mansion. I transferred every remaining cent of my liquid assets, which after the catering charge was a pathetic sum of $840 into this new vault. Then came the passwords. For 10 years, my passwords had been variations of my childhood dog's name and my birth year. It was pathetic security, the kind that relied on the assumption that the people who knew those details loved the community enough not to use them against me. I was wrong. I changed everything. My email, my social media, my utility accounts, my insurance portal. The new passwords were 20 characters long, random strings of gibberish generated by a security app, X7K9MP2. They were ugly, impossible to memorize, and beautiful. They were the first walls I had ever built that President Kensington could not guilt-trip her way through. I activated two-factor authentication on everything. I watched the little 6-digit codes pop up on my phone screen, and for the first time, I didn't feel annoyed by the extra step. I felt protected. Every time a code appeared, it was like the universe asking, "Is this you?" Ava and me finally having the power to say yes and only me. Now the heavy lifting, Marlene said, handing me a fresh cup of tea. The credit freeze. I logged into Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion one by one. I placed a freeze on my social security number. It was a strange sensation. I was locking myself out of the financial world to keep them out. I wrote down the PIN codes for the unfreeze process on a piece of paper, folded it, and put it inside my hollowed-out copy of a business ethics textbook. Those PIN codes were the keys to my life. And for the first time since I was born, I was the only one holding the keychain. "Okay," I said, closing the last browser tab. "The bleed has stopped. Now we look at the damage." Marlene had been busy while I was building my digital fortress. She had created a spreadsheet on her laptop. She called it the ledger. It was a terrifying document. It listed every transaction for the last 5 years where I had covered a cost for the board. But Marlene being Marlene had added a column for stated reason and a column for probable reality. Date November 3rd. Amount $600. Stated reason. President needs urgent welcome sign repair. Probable reality casino withdrawal at Rivers Casino. Same date. Date January 12th. Amount $300. Stated reason. Tyler suit for networking event. Probable reality bar tab at the Midnight Lounge tagged in photos. The total, Marlene said, her voice neutral. I looked at the bottom of the spreadsheet. The number was $42,580. That was the cash I had directly transferred or paid. That did not include the new $50,000 loan application or the potential liability of the lease on Tyler's pavilion. $42,000. That was a down payment on a condo. That was a trip to Europe I had denied myself for a decade. That was my freedom siphoned off in $20 and $50 and $500 increments. All while they told me I was cheap and calculating. I felt a cold rage settle in my stomach. It wasn't the hot, teary anger of the graduation hall. This was the cold, hard anger of an auditor who has found the embezzlement. "We need to tell them," I said, "but not a phone call. They don't listen to phone calls." "No," Marlene agreed. "We need to put it in writing. Notice of termination." I drafted the letter. I didn't use legal jargon, but I didn't use affectionate language either. I wrote it like a memo from a compliance department. To President Kensington, her husband, and Tyler. Effective immediately. I have closed all credit cards on which you were authorized users. I have placed a security freeze on my credit reports. I will no longer be accepting requests for financial assistance of any kind. Furthermore, I am disputing the charge of $3,250 to Lakeside Catering as unauthorized. I am also reporting the credit inquiry from First National Bank as fraudulent activity. Do not contact me to discuss this. Any future communication regarding financial matters will be forwarded to my legal representation. Ava. I read it over. It was brief. It was brutal. It was perfect. Now, Marlene said, "How do we deliver its certified mail to the mansion?" I held the letter in my hand. Sending it to the mansion felt insufficient. If I sent it to the mansion, the president would open it, cry in the kitchen, and then hide it from her husband. Or Tyler would tear it up and say I was bluffing. They would process it in the shadows where they were comfortable. They would gaslight each other and then gaslight me. I needed sunlight. I needed witnesses. "No," I said, a plan forming in my mind. Not the mansion. I checked Tyler's Instagram again. He had posted a flyer earlier that morning. Sunday brunch open house. The flyer screamed in neon fonts. Come see the new pavilion and hear about the next big investment opportunity. Investors welcome. Noon to 4. He was hosting an event. He was inviting people, his network, his friends, potential investors, for whatever scam he was running this week, to the pavilion he had rented with my forged signature. He was going to be performing. He was going to be the big man on campus. And I knew Tyler. I knew his fatal flaw. He loved being admired. If a courier arrived with a package in front of an audience, he wouldn't be able to resist opening it. He would think it was a gift. He would think it was a bottle of scotch or a plaque. He would want to show off that his board supported him. We are sending it to the party, I said. Marlene looked at me, her eyebrow arching. That is aggressive. They live-streamed my humiliation. I reminded her. I am just returning the favor via FedEx. I prepared 3 envelopes. One for the president, one for her husband, one for Tyler. In the president's envelope, I put a copy of the DocuSign email log showing she had accessed my account to forge the lease. In her husband's envelope, I put the receipt for the catering charge with the dispute reference number stamped on it in red ink. But for Tyler, I prepared something special. I took the notification from the bank regarding the $50,000 loan application, the one that listed the applicant as me, but the address as the Kensington mansion. I highlighted the fraud alert section. I also included a copy of the ledger, specifically the page showing how much money he had borrowed versus how much he had earned in the last 5 years. I put all 3 envelopes into a larger rigid express mailer. I addressed it to Tyler Kensington. I wrote urgent or perishable on the outside just to make sure he opened it immediately. It wasn't perishable, of course, unless you counted his reputation. We need a courier, I said. It needs to get there by 1 o'clock, right when the brunch is peaking. Marlene drove me to the 24-hour dispatch center downtown. It was 3 o'clock in the morning by the time we got there. The city was asleep, but I felt more awake than I had in years. I handed the package to the clerk. He weighed it. Priority Sunday delivery, he asked. That is going to be $60. I pulled out my own debit card. My new debit card linked to my new secret bank account. Worth every penny, I said. As we walked back to the car, the night air felt crisp. I wasn't shaking anymore. I wasn't crying. I felt a strange sense of calm. You know, I said to Marlene as we buckled our seatbelts. I always thought that if I stood up for myself, I would have to scream. I thought I would have to have a big dramatic fight where I listed all my grievances and they finally understood. Marlene started the engine. And now I realize that screaming is for people who want to be heard, I said, looking out the window at the passing streetlights. I don't need them to hear me. I just need them to see the paperwork. I thought about Tyler standing in that rented pavilion tomorrow, surrounded by people he was trying to impress. I thought about him holding that package up, thinking it was a trophy. I thought about the moment he would slide his finger under the flap. He is saying he is going to evict Tyler if the lease is fraudulent. You need to call him and tell him you signed it. You need to lie for us, Eva. Just this one last time. Please. We are the board. Just this one last time. How many times had I heard that? Just one last loan. Just one last favor. Just one last time being the doormat so they could wipe their feet. I picked up the phone. I went to the settings. I selected block caller for the president. I selected block caller for her husband. I selected block caller for Tyler. I selected block caller for Uncle Dale. The vibrating stopped. The room was quiet again. Someone sent the landlord the video? Marlene asked, a hint of a smile in her voice. I looked at her. I might have tagged the property management company in the comments of Tyler's video before the feed cut out. Marlene let out a breathy laugh. You are learning. I learned from the best, I said. But the war wasn't over. I knew that. This was just the opening salvo. They were embarrassed. Yes. They were exposed. Yes. But they were cornered animals now. And cornered animals don't just bark. They bite. They are going to come here, I said. They know where I live. They are going to come to my apartment. You are not going to your apartment, Marlene said firmly. You are staying here. I have a guest room and I have a security system that connects directly to the precinct. Let the president try to pound on my door. I have been waiting to have a conversation with her for 20 years. I looked at the blank screen of my iPad. The party was over. The champagne was warm. The investors were gone. And somewhere in that mansion on River Road, 3 people were standing in the wreckage of their own greed, realizing that the ATM had not just stopped dispensing cash. It had started dispensing justice. I'm hungry, I said, realizing I hadn't eaten since the stale cookie at the graduation hall. Do you have anything other than popcorn? Marlene smiled. I have steaks in the freezer, and I have a bottle of wine that I bought for a special occasion. Is this a special occasion? I asked. The day you get your life back, Marlene said, walking toward the kitchen. I would say that counts. I followed her. I didn't look back at the phone. The bridge was burned and the fire was beautiful. The phone on Aunt Marlene's coffee table was vibrating with the persistence of a trapped insect. I had blocked their numbers on my cell, but I had forgotten one thing. They knew Marlene's landline. It was a number that hadn't changed in 20 years. A number written in the emergency contact section of every HOA form I had ever filled out. Marlene looked at the ancient cordless handset, then at me. Do you want me to unplug it? She asked. I stared at the device. Unplugging it would be easy. It would be running away. It would be hiding in the bunker while the enemy pounded on the roof. But I was not hiding anymore. I had sent the declaration of war. And now I needed to hear how the other side was taking the news. No, I said, reaching out. My hand was steady. I will take it. I picked up the handset. I pressed the green button. Hello, I said. Ava. It was the president. Her voice was not the booming jovial baritone she used when she was holding court at a barbecue. It was low, tight, and dripping with a specific kind of disappointment that used to make me crumble when I was a teenager. It was the voice of the matriarch scolding the unruly resident. Madam President, I said. I am going to assume, she started, speaking slowly as if I were simple, that you are having a breakdown. That is the only explanation for the stunt you pulled today. Sending a courier to Tyler's open house in front of his business partners. It wasn't a stunt, I said. It was a notification. It was cruel, Ava, she said. People talk. You embarrassed us. You embarrassed this board. We don't do that. We don't air our dirty laundry in the street. Adults sit down and discuss things. They don't send process servers to a celebration. I felt a laugh bubble up in my chest. Dry and sharp. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. You are right, I said. Adults don't do that. Adults also don't skip their residence graduation to drink champagne. Adults don't forge signatures. Adults don't open credit lines in other people's names. We were going to tell you, she interrupted, her voice rising. It was just a timing thing. Tyler needed the liquidity for the launch. We were going to pay it back before the first statement even hit. We were protecting you from the stress. Protecting me? I repeated. By stealing $50,000 of my credit. Borrowing? She shouted. It is borrowing. God, you make it sound so ugly. Why do you always have to look at the numbers and not the intent? We are the board. What is mine is yours, and what is yours is ours. That is how this works. No, I said. That is how it worked when I was the one paying and you were the ones taking. The math has changed. Madam President. You are being petty, she spat. You are counting pennies while Tyler is trying to build an empire. I am not counting pennies, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that was louder than her shouting. I am just sending back what I have already paid for. That package. That wasn't an attack. That was a receipt. There was a scuffling sound on the other end of the line, a rustle of fabric, a muffled argument. Then her husband's voice came on. He wasn't shouting. He was crying. It was a performance I knew well. It was the weeping patriarch. Act 3. Eva. He sobbed. Eva. Baby, please. My chest hurts. I can't breathe. Why are you doing this to me? For years, that sound would have sent me rushing to my car. I would have dropped everything. Work, dates, sleep to go to him, to fix it, to apologize for crimes I hadn't committed, just to make the crying stop. But today, listening to his ragged breathing through the static of the landline, I didn't feel the pull. I felt like a biologist observing a specimen under a microscope. I saw the mechanism. I saw the gears. Frank, I said, the dispute has already been filed. How can you be so cold? He wept. I carried you through every special assessment. I raised you in this community. I sat up with you when you had the chicken pox from the welcome event. I made sure you had everything. And now you want to send your president and me to jail over a signature. It was just a piece of paper. Eva, I didn't think you would mind. You always help Tyler. You always help us. I help when I'm asked. I said, I do not help when I'm robbed. We didn't rob you. He wailed. We were trying to give you a future if Tyler's deal goes through. We all get rich. We were doing this for you, too. For me, I said flatly. Like the graduation was for me. Like the empty chairs were for me. We said we were sorry about that. He snapped, the tears instantly vanishing, replaced by irritation. The mask had slipped. How many times do we have to apologize? We were busy. Tyler needed us. And now I need myself. I said, give me the phone. It was Tyler. I heard him snatch the device from him. His breathing was heavy, ragged. He sounded like a man who had been running. You listen to me, Tyler hissed. You have no idea what you just did. You have no idea. I think I do, I said. I think I just saved myself $50,000. You cost me $2 million, he screamed. The sound distorted the speaker. That guy in the blue suit, that was Marcus Thorne. He was about to sign for the seed round on my real estate portfolio. He was going to put in $500,000 today. And then you had to send your little package. So, I said, putting the pieces together. The party wasn't an appreciation gala. It was a sales pitch. You were using the pavilion I unknowingly co-signed for to look successful so you could trick investors into giving you money. It is not a trick, he yelled. It is leverage. That is how business works. You fake it until you make it. And I almost made it. I was at the finish line, Eva. And you tripped me. You were running on a track made of my bones. Tyler, I said. I just stood up. I am going to fix this. He said, his voice dropping to a menacing growl. I am going to tell them you are crazy. I am going to tell them you are off your meds. I am going to tell them you forged the documents to frame me because you are jealous. Go ahead, I said. Tell them. But before you do, I have one question. What? He snapped. I took a deep breath. This was the moment, the pivot point. Who checked the box? I asked. What? On the loan application. I said clearly on the credit inquiry. The one for $50,000. There is a section for the address. Someone had to manually type in 42 Maple Drive instead of my apartment address. Someone had to make the conscious decision to divert the mail so I wouldn't see it. Who was it? Tyler? Was it you? Or was it the president? The line went silent. It wasn't a peaceful silence. It wasn't the silence of a dropped call. It was a thick, heavy, suffocating silence. It was the sound of three people in a room looking at each other, calculating the odds. If Tyler said it was him, he admitted to federal mail fraud. If he said it was the president, he threw his greatest ally under the bus. If he said it was her husband, he dismantled the patriarch. They couldn't answer because to answer was to admit that it wasn't an accident. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't borrowing. It was a premeditated, calculated conspiracy to deceive me. The silence stretched for 10 seconds, then 20. I could hear a clock ticking in the background on their end. That is what I thought, I said into the void. I didn't hang up. I wanted them to be the ones to break the connection. I wanted them to have to retreat. Finally, after another agonizing 10 seconds, the line clicked dead. I lowered the handset and placed it gently back on the cradle. My hand was shaking slightly, but not from fear. It was the shaking of a muscle that had just lifted a heavy weight for the first time. "Well?" Marlene asked. She was standing in the doorway holding 2 glasses of red wine. "They didn't deny it," I said. "They just tried to convince me that I was the villain for noticing it." "Standard operating procedure," Marlene said, handing me a glass. My cell phone, which was sitting on the armrest, lit up with a notification. It wasn't a call. It was a direct message on Instagram. It was from Uncle Dale. I picked it up. Dale the man. "Hey, kiddo. Just saw things got heated. Look, don't be too hard on the board. I was just filming for fun yesterday. You know me, always trying to capture the memories. Didn't mean to make you look bad. Filming for fun." I thought about him panning the camera across the empty chairs. I thought about the caption he had spoken aloud. A graduation with 0 guests. I thought about him leaving the backup phone on the shelf to stream my misery to the party. I typed back. My thumbs moved fast. "Eva. You filmed me sitting alone in a room for an hour. You broadcast it to a party I wasn't invited to. You provided the entertainment for the people who were robbing me. Which part of that was the fun part, Dale? Was it the part where I was crying or the part where you got likes for it?" I hit send. Then I blocked him. I took a sip of the wine. It was rich and dry. Tasted like adulthood. "There is one last thing," I said to Marlene. I opened the board group chat. The one named Pinewood Family Love. It had 4 members. Me, the president, her husband, Tyler. I typed a message. "From this moment forward, any charge made to any account in my name will be immediately disputed as fraud. I have instructed my bank to flag any transaction from your geographic location. The police report regarding the identity theft has been filed and cannot be withdrawn. Do not come to my apartment. Do not call my work. If you need to contact me regarding the repayment of the unauthorized debts, you may do so via email at the address provided in the package. This is not a negotiation." I hit send. Then I did something I had never done before. I left the group. Ava Thompson has left the conversation. I put the phone down on the table face down. The room was quiet. Marlene took a sip of her wine and sat down in the chair opposite me. "How does it feel?" she asked. I looked around the room. It was just a living room. There were no streamers, no banners, no applause, but there was also no anxiety. There was no waiting for the other shoe to drop. There was no dread about what the next text message would ask for. "It's quiet," I said. "Is it too quiet?" she asked. "Are you lonely?" I listened to the silence. Yesterday in the graduation hall, the silence had felt like a vacuum, sucking the life out of me. It had felt like abandonment. But this silence was different. It had mass. It had structure. It was a wall I had built myself. "No," I said, smiling at my neighbor. "I'm not lonely. I'm secure." I took another sip of wine. "For the first time in my life," I said. "I know exactly how much I have in the bank and I know exactly who is sitting at my table." I looked at Marlene and that, I said, is enough. Monday morning arrived with the clinical brightness of a hospital waiting room. I was not at work. I had called in sick for the first time in 5 years, telling my manager I had a family emergency, which was technically the most honest thing I had ever said. I sat at Aunt Marlene's dining table, which was now command central. My laptop was open, flanked by Marlene's heavy-duty laser printer and a pot of coffee that was strong enough to wake the dead. The digital footprint, Marlene said, placing a fresh mug in front of me. It is the one thing liars always forget. They think if they delete an email, it is gone. They think if they clear a browser history, they are ghosts. But in the world of compliance, nothing is ever truly gone. She was right. I spent 40 hours a week auditing companies that thought they were clever. I knew exactly where to look. I need the audit trail, I said, logging into the e-signature platform's guest portal. Every electronic document has a certificate of completion. It logs every view, every click, and every signature with a timestamp and an IP address. I input the document ID from the fraudulent lease agreement, the one I had found in the trash folder. The system thought for a moment, the little wheel spinning, and then it spit out a PDF. Certificate of Completion Lease Agreement, 1500 River Road. I scrolled past the names and the dates to the section labeled Audit Trail. Here it is, I said, my finger tracing the line on the screen. Status viewed. Time April 14th, 7:45 in the evening. IP address 68.142.199 to 201. Location Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Status signed. Time April 14th, 7:52 in the evening. IP address 68.142.99201. 7:52 in the evening on April 14th. I said aloud. Where was I at 7:52 on April 14th? I pulled up my Google Maps timeline. It was a terrifyingly accurate record of my life. I scrolled back to April 14th. At 7:52 in the evening, my blue dot was moving along Interstate 376. I was driving home from a late shift at the office. I was doing 60 mph on the highway. I could not possibly have been signing a lease on a laptop. And that IP address, Marlene said, leaning in. Run a traceroute. I didn't need to. I recognized the first 2 octets. But I ran it anyway. The geolocation pinned it to a residential neighborhood in the North Hills. Specifically, it pinned it to the block where the Kensington mansion stood. They signed it from their house, I said, while I was driving home. But they needed access, Marlene noted. How did they bypass the 2-factor authentication? Usually, these sites send a code to your email. I closed my eyes and the memory washed over me like cold water. April 14th. I had stopped by the president's house on my way home to drop off some groceries they had asked for. I was in the kitchen putting milk in the fridge. My laptop bag was on the counter. Ava, the president had said, her voice sweet and frantic. My printer is acting up again and I need to print this recipe for the church potluck tomorrow. Can I just use your computer real quick? It is already connected to the Wi-Fi. I hadn't hesitated. I had unlocked the laptop. I had logged her in. I had even opened the browser for her. Sure, Madam President. I will just finish putting these away. I was in the kitchen for 10 minutes. 10 minutes. She didn't print a recipe. I whispered, opening my eyes. She opened my email. She triggered the signature request. She got the verification code. She signed it. And then she deleted the evidence. Marlene finished, but she wasn't thorough enough. I said, I switched tabs to my email. I went to the trash folder. It was empty. She had cleared it. Check the recoverable items. Marlene suggested the folder that holds the things you deleted from the deleted folder. Most people don't know it exists. I navigated to the hidden recovery folder, a failsafe for corporate accounts. And there they were. Subject: please verify your identity to sign. Received April 14th. 7:48 in the evening. Subject: You have successfully signed lease agreement. Received April 14th. 7:52 in the evening. She had deleted them. She had emptied the trash, but she hadn't scrubbed the server. Got you, I said softly. I wasn't sad anymore. I was clinical. This was evidence. This was a chain of custody. Time to call the bank, I said. I dialed the fraud department number for First National Bank, the institution where the $50,000 loan application had been lodged. Fraud department, this is Agent Miller, a voice answered. Agent Miller, I said, my voice crisp and professional. My name is Ava Thompson. I am calling to follow up on a fraud alert for a credit inquiry. I have additional documentation to provide regarding identity theft. Go ahead, Ms. Thompson. I have the IP logs from a separate fraudulent transaction that occurred 2 weeks prior, I said, speaking the language of the trade. I have reason to believe the same perpetrator initiated the loan application. The address used on the application matches the geolocation of the IP address used to forge a legal document in my name. I could hear Agent Miller typing on the other end. The rhythm changed. He wasn't typing notes anymore. He was typing commands. You have the IP logs? He asked, sounding interested. I have the certificate of completion with timestamps, the geolocation data, and a sworn affidavit regarding my own physical location at the time of signing, backed by GPS data. I listed, I am preparing a full dossier to submit to you via secure portal. Ms. Thompson, Agent Miller said, his voice respectful. Do you work in the industry? I am a compliance auditor, I said. Understood, he said. Send it over. If the IP on the loan application matches the IP on that lease, we have them dead to rights. We will flag the account as a confirmed takeover. You won't be liable for a penny. Thank you, I said. I will also be including a police report number within the hour. I hung up. I felt a surge of power. This was what I did. I took messy, chaotic lies and organized them into neat, indisputable rows of truth. Then my phone buzzed. It was a text from Tyler. I hadn't blocked him on this new burner number I was using for the two-factor authentication, but he must have texted my main number, which I had unblocked briefly to check for voicemails. Neighbor, please. The text bubble expanded. I know you are mad. I get it. The loan thing was a mistake. The president pressed the wrong button. But the lease, the landlord is freaking out. He says he's going to call the cops if the signature is invalid. I need you to just sign a confirmation. Just sign a thing saying you authorized it retroactively. Please, I will pay the rent. I swear. Just sign this one time so I don't go to jail. I stared at the screen. He didn't realize what he had just done. In his panic, in his desperation to put a band-aid on the wound, he had just handed me the murder weapon. Just sign a thing saying you authorized it retroactively. That sentence proved that he knew I hadn't authorized it the first time. Proved intent. Proved knowledge of the crime. I didn't reply. I didn't type a furious paragraph about how he had ruined my credit. I took a screenshot. I saved it to the cloud. I emailed it to Marlene. I printed a physical copy. He just confessed, I said, handing the printout to Marlene. Marlene read it and let out a low whistle. He is not very bright, is he? He is asking you to conspire to commit fraud to cover up his previous fraud. He is desperate, I said. He is used to me fixing it. He thinks if he begs hard enough, I will just make the bad man go away. Well, Marlene said, tapping her chin, maybe we should help him. I looked at her, shocked. What? Not help him get away with it? She said, her eyes gleaming with a strategic light. Help him dig the hole deeper. He wants you to sign something fine. Let's invite them to sign something. She walked over to the window. If we just go to the police with this, they might claim Tyler was joking or that you manipulated the text. But if we get them in a room with official witnesses, and we get them to admit on the record that the first signature was fake. A trap, I said. A settlement meeting, Marlene corrected. We tell them you are willing to discuss a solution. We tell them to meet us at a neutral location. Not the mansion, not a coffee shop. A notary public, I said, catching on. Exactly. Marlene said, a notary office has cameras. It has a sworn officer of the state present. We tell them we are going to sign a board repayment agreement or some nonsense. We tell them that if they sign it agreeing to pay back the debt, you will drop the dispute. But the dispute is already filed. I said they don't know that for sure. Marlene said they are operating on fear. We use that fear to get them into the light. I looked at the screenshot of Tyler's text. Just sign this one time. I sat down and drafted a reply. I stripped all the anger out of my voice. I stripped out the compliance officer. I channeled the old Ava, the neighbor who just wanted everyone to get along. Tyler, I typed. I can't just sign a retroactive letter. That is not legal. But I am willing to meet if we can get a formal repayment plan in writing, notarized. So, I know I am protected. I might be willing to talk to the landlord. It wasn't a lie. Technically, I was willing to talk to the landlord. I was willing to tell him exactly which prison my neighbor was heading to. Meet me tomorrow at 10 o'clock in the morning at Innocent Associates Notary Services on 4th Street. Bring the president and her husband. If we settle this, we settle it on paper. I hit send. The response was immediate. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Tyler wrote back. I knew you wouldn't leave me hanging. We will be there. Promise. Eva, I am going to make this right. You are the best. You are the best. I felt a phantom ache in my chest 3 days ago. That text would have made me happy. It would have made me feel valuable. Now it just looked like bait. They are coming. I told Marlene. Good. She said. I will call my friend at the notary office and maybe I will call someone else too. Who? You will see. She said. I looked down at the dossier we had built, the IP logs, the deleted emails, the screenshot of the confession, the credit report. It was a heavy stack of paper. It was a weapon made of wood pulp and ink. I wasn't going to that meeting to sign a repayment plan. I wasn't going there to make peace. I was going there to close the book. Get some rest. Marlene said. You need to look sharp tomorrow. You are the lead prosecutor. I nodded. I closed my laptop. I walked to the guest room and lay down on the bed. But I didn't sleep. I practiced the timeline in my head. 7:45. View. 7:52. Sign. 7:52. Driving. I repeated it like a mantra. It was the rhythm of my liberation. Tomorrow. They would walk into that office expecting the Ava who folded, the Ava who paid, the Ava who apologized for taking up space. They were going to be very surprised when they met the Ava who kept the receipts. The office of Innocent Associates Notary Services was designed to be forgettable. It had beige walls, industrial gray carpet, and a distinct smell of laser printer toner and lemon disinfectant. It was the kind of place where people signed wills, transferred car titles, and finalized divorces. It was sterile. It was neutral, and it was perfectly wired. I sat at the long polished oak table in the conference room. Aunt Marlene sat to my right. We had arrived 30 minutes early to position ourselves. I had chosen the seat facing the door, the seat typically reserved for the person running the meeting. Marlene had placed a single manila folder in front of me. It was closed. At 10 o'clock exactly, the heavy glass door at the front of the office swung open. The board walked in. They looked like a group of people who had been inconvenienced by a minor traffic accident, not people who were walking into a legal ambush. President Kensington was wearing her business casual polo shirt, the one she wore when she wanted to look approachable but authoritative. Her husband was wearing oversized sunglasses, hiding eyes that I assumed were puffy from the tears he had used to manipulate me on the phone yesterday. And then there was Tyler. He looked terrible. His skin was sallow, and he was wearing a hoodie that cost $300, but looked like he had slept in it. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the floor, tapping his leg nervously. Trailing behind them like a persistent shadow was Uncle Dale. He had his phone in his hand, held low against his chest, the lens already peeking out. He couldn't help himself. He was addicted to the spectacle. "Well," the president said, pulling out a chair at the opposite end of the table. She didn't say hello. She scraped the chair legs against the floor, a harsh grating sound. "We are here. Let's get this over with so I can get back to work. I had to shift a meeting for this." "Hello, Madam President," I said. My voice was calm. It didn't waver. "Hello, Frank. Tyler." "Hi, dear," the president said, her voice trembling slightly. She sat down next to her husband and reached across the table as if to touch my hand. But the table was too wide. Her hand hovered in the empty space, then dropped. "I am so glad you decided to be reasonable. We didn't sleep a wink last night. We were so worried about you." "Worried about me?" I repeated. "Or worried about the landlord?" Tyler's head snapped up. "Can we not do this?" he snapped. "Can we just sign the paper? You said on the text that if we came, we could settle it." I said we could discuss a settlement. I corrected him. I said I needed everything in writing. "Fine," Tyler said. He reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. I wrote it down. Ava Thompson retroactively authorized the signature on the lease for 1500 River Road and agreed to be the guarantor. "Just sign it and I will pay you back the deposit when my funding clears next week." He slid the paper across the table. It was handwritten on notebook paper. It looked like a hall pass written by a truant middle schooler. I looked at the paper. Then I looked at Tyler. "You want me to sign a confession?" I said. "It is not a confession," Tyler said, his voice rising. "It is a solution. You are making such a big deal out of nothing. It was one signature. Ava won. You act like I killed someone. I was doing it for the board business. You are blowing this up because you are bitter about your little graduation ceremony." "My little graduation ceremony?" I said slowly. "Yes." Tyler threw his hands up. "We get it. You were sad. We didn't show up. Boo-hoo. So now you are trying to torch my life to get even. That is petty, Ava. That is low." I felt Marlene tense beside me, but I placed a hand on her arm to steady her. "I am not here because I am sad. Tyler," I said, "I am here because my name is Ava Thompson, and that name belongs to me. It does not belong to the Pinewood Estates board. It does not belong to your real estate schemes. It is mine." "Oh, for God's sake," the president interrupted, slamming her hand down on the table. "Enough with the drama. We are a board. Boards share burdens. Your neighbor needed a leg up. We used your credit because yours was the only one that wasn't leveraged at the moment. We were going to pay it back. We always pay it back." "When?" I asked. "When have you paid it back? Was it the time you borrowed $200 for groundskeeping and spent it at a steakhouse? Was it the time you used my card for the rental car and returned it empty? Those are small potatoes," the president yelled. "You are counting crumbs. We raised you in this community. We put a roof over your head for 18 years. You owe us." "I owe you respect," I said. "I do not owe you my credit score, and I certainly do not owe you my identity." "Lower your voice," her husband hissed, looking around the room. "People can hear you. This is a private board matter." "Actually," I said, pointing to a small discreet sign on the wall behind me, "it is not private." They all turned to look. "Premises under audio and video surveillance. We are in a notary office," I explained. Everything that happens in this room is being recorded for legal security. There are cameras in the corners. There are microphones in the ceiling. The president's face went a shade of red that bordered on purple. You set us up. I created a safe environment, I said. Since you like to rewrite history, I thought it would be best if we had an objective record. I am leaving, Tyler said, standing up. This is a trap. She is crazy. Sit down. Mr. Kensington, a voice said from the corner of the room. The door to the inner office opened. It wasn't the notary. A man stepped out. He was tall, wearing a charcoal gray suit that was perfectly tailored. He held a leather portfolio in his hand. He didn't look like a family friend. He looked like the person you call when things have gone very, very wrong. My board froze. Who is this? The president demanded. Ava, who is this man? My name is Agent Henderson, the man said. He walked to the end of the table and placed his portfolio down. I am a senior fraud investigator with the Regional Banking Integrity Unit. I work closely with First National Bank. The room went so quiet I could hear the hum of the vending machine in the hallway. First National? The president whispered. Her hand went to her throat. Why is he here? Tyler asked, his voice cracking. He didn't sit down, but he didn't leave. He looked trapped. I am here because a formal report of identity theft and bank fraud was filed yesterday regarding a loan application for $50,000. Agent Henderson said his voice was conversational, almost bored, which made it terrifying. Ms. Thompson provided us with significant digital evidence. However, before we finalized the transfer of the file to federal authorities, we needed to verify a few details regarding the pattern of activity. Federal authorities. The president choked out. Now hold on a minute. This is a misunderstanding. My resident, she is confused. I don't think she is. Agent Henderson said. He opened his portfolio. He took out a photo. It was the screenshot of the text Tyler had sent me last night. The one where he asked me to sign retroactively. Mr. Kensington, Henderson said, looking at Tyler, did you send this text message? Tyler stared at the photo. He looked at me. His eyes were wide with betrayal. You screenshotted it, he whispered. Did you send it? Henderson repeated. I was just trying to fix it, Tyler stammered. I didn't mean. Look, I only used her name because she usually lets me. She is my neighbor. I have used her card 1,000 times. She always covers for me. It is not fraud if she says yes, right? So, you admit to using her financial credentials? Henderson asked, taking a silver pen out of his pocket. You admit that you have a history of accessing her accounts? Yes. No. Tyler looked at the president for help. Madam President, tell him Ava pays for everything. It is how we do things. He is right, the president said, trying to regain control. Ava has always been generous. She gives us access. This was just an extension of that. We assumed permission. You assumed permission to apply for a $50,000 loan? Henderson asked. And to divert the mail to a different address so she wouldn't see it. We didn't want to worry her. The president blurted out. She has been so stressed with her school. We wanted to get the money, do the business deal, and pay it back before she even noticed. We were protecting her by signing her name. Henderson asked. It was just a signature, the president cried. I signed her name on school permission slips when she was 12. What is the difference? The difference, Henderson said, his voice dropping an octave, is that a permission slip doesn't involve federal wire statutes. The difference is that signing a legal financial document as another person without their power of attorney for the purpose of obtaining funds is a felony. It is called forgery, and when you do it online, it is wire fraud. The president's face went white. She looked at me for the first time. She wasn't seeing her resident. She was seeing the witness. Ava, She whispered, Tell him to stop. You can't let them take your neighbor. You can't let them take us. We are your board. I looked at them. I looked at the three people who had been the center of my universe for 34 years. I saw the fear in their eyes, but I didn't see remorse. I saw panic. They weren't sorry they did it. They were sorry they were caught. I can't tell him to stop. Madam President, I said softly, because I am not the one driving the car anymore. You are? I saw movement out of the corner of my eye. Uncle Dale. He had raised his phone. He was filming. He was actually filming this. He was capturing his own board's destruction because he couldn't resist the content. Uncle Dale, I said. My voice was sharp enough to cut glass. He looked at me startled. The red recording light was blinking. Turn it off, I said. I am just documenting, he mumbled. For the records, like you said. No, I said. I stood up. I walked over to him. I loomed over him in his chair. You filmed me when I was alone in that hall. You broadcast my pain to a party of strangers so they could laugh at me. You used my life as content. I pointed a finger at his phone. If you do not turn that off and delete it right now, I said, I will have Agent Henderson add you to the file as an accessory to the fraud. You were at the party. You knew about the spending. You benefited from the stolen money. Dale's eyes went wide. He looked at Henderson. Henderson nodded once grimly. Dale tapped the screen frantically. Stop recording. Delete. Delete from recently deleted. He put the phone in his pocket. He looked small. I said. It wasn't a laugh. Today is not a show, Dale. Today, no one gets to use my humiliation for entertainment. Today, the camera is off. I turned back to the table. Tyler was crying now. Not the manipulative tears of the president, but the ugly, snotty tears of a boy who realizes the playground rules don't apply in court. Please, Tyler sobbed. I will pay it back. I will get a job. A real job. I will work at Starbucks. I will do anything. Just don't file it. It is already filed. Mr. Kensington. Henderson said he closed his portfolio. The sound of the leather slapping shut echoed in the silent room. We have the IP logs. Henderson continued, looking at each of them in turn. We have the timestamps. We have the confession you just made regarding the history of usage. We have the text messages. And now, thanks to the security system in this office, we have video and audio confirmation of your admission that you signed the documents to protect the victim from knowing about the debt. He looked at me. Ms. Thompson, he said, the bank has completed its preliminary investigation. Based on the evidence provided and the statements made here today, we have sufficient grounds to designate the loan application and the lease as fraudulent activity. What does that mean? The president whispered. She looked old. All the bluster was gone. She looked like a woman watching her house burn down. It means Henderson said that the bank will be absolving Ms. Thompson of liability, but the bank does not just absorb a loss of this magnitude. When we confirm fraud, we are required by law to refer the matter to the district attorney's office for prosecution. Prosecution, the president breathed. We are moving the file to the next step. Henderson said, I suggest you all retain legal counsel. Real counsel, not a notary. He turned to me. Ms. Thompson, you are free to go. We will be in touch regarding the final paperwork to clear your credit report. I stood up. I picked up my purse. Eva. Tyler lunged across the table, grabbing my wrist. You can't leave. You have to stop him. Tell him it was a mistake. Tell him we are the board. I looked at his hand on my wrist. His grip was tight, desperate. I looked him in the eye. We are the board. Tyler, I said. That is why this hurts. But the board doesn't steal $50,000 from you and then laugh about it at a brunch. I pulled my arm away. His hand slipped off. I didn't send the police to your door, I said, looking at the president. I just opened the door you knocked on. I turned and walked toward the exit. Marlene was right beside me, behind me. I heard the president start to scream. It was a high, thin sound of total despair. I heard her husband shouting at Henderson. I heard Tyler sobbing. I pushed the glass door open and stepped out into the street. The sun was shining. It was a bright, clear Tuesday morning. The air smelled of exhaust and coffee from the shop next door. It smelled like the real world. My phone buzzed in my purse. I ignored it. That went well, Marlene said, adjusting her glasses. Is it over? I asked. The lie is over, Marlene said. Now comes the cleanup. I took a deep breath. I felt light. I felt empty, but in a good way, like a room that had finally been cleared of clutter so the renovation could begin. Let's go, I said. I have a graduation to celebrate. The fallout from the meeting at the notary office was not a slow burn. It was an explosion. Once Agent Henderson formally transferred the file to the federal authorities, the machinery of the banking system ground into gear with terrifying efficiency. Within 24 hours, the temporary freeze on my credit became permanent. The $50,000 loan application was flagged as criminal fraud. The lease agreement for the pavilion on River Road was voided, triggering an immediate eviction notice for Tyler. His investors, the few who had actually considered putting money into his vague portfolio, vanished the moment the word investigation hit the grapevine. The landlord, furious at being duped with a forged signature, threatened to sue for damages. But since Tyler had no assets and no income, there was nothing to take. Tyler was not just broke. He was radioactive. 3 weeks later, we sat in a different room. This was not a beige notary office. This was the conference room of a mediation firm downtown. A room with mahogany tables and a view of the city skyline that Tyler had always felt entitled to own. I sat on one side of the table with my lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Elena, whom Marlene had recommended. On the other side sat the president, her husband, and Tyler. They looked smaller than I remembered. The bluster was gone. The arrogance had evaporated. They looked like people who had been trying to outrun an avalanche and had finally been buried. We are here to discuss the terms of the civil settlement, Elena said, opening a thick file and to finalize the restraining order. The president cleared her throat. She looked tired. Her polo shirt was wrinkled. Eva, she said, not looking at me, but at the space between us. Can we pause the legal talk for a second? I have been looking at the accounts. I can liquidate my retirement fund. I can pull out $10,000, maybe 12. She looked up then, her eyes pleading. I will give you the $12,000, she said. It is a down payment. We will pay the rest over time. Just tell the district attorney you want to drop the charges. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. If Tyler has a felony on his record, he will never get a decent job. You are killing his future. $12,000, I said. It is all we have. Her husband added, his voice a whisper. She wasn't crying today. She was past tears. She was in the stage of bargaining with fate. The total amount theft over the last 5 years is $42,000, I said, reciting the number from Marlene's ledger. The attempted theft was another $50,000. The liability on the lease was $3,000 a month. We know, the president said, but $12,000 is cash right now. Just take it, Eva. Be the bigger person one last time. I looked at the checkbook sitting in front of her. It was the same checkbook she had claimed to forget on the day of my graduation. Partial payment does not erase a crime. Madam President, I said, you are trying to buy my silence with a fraction of the money you stole from me. That is not how justice works. And I'm not interested in being the bigger person anymore. I am interested in being a secure person. You are so selfish, Tyler snapped. He had been silent until now, slouching in his chair. Now he sat up, his face twisted with the same petulant rage I had seen 1,000 times when he didn't get his way. "I am selfish," I asked calmly. "Yes," Tyler shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "You are ruining my life. I am getting kicked out of the pavilion tomorrow. My friends have blocked me. I might go to jail. And you are sitting there in your nice suit acting like you are perfect. You did this. You pushed the button." "I did not push the button," I said. "I did not log into a computer that wasn't mine. I did not forge a signature. I did not divert mail. You are destroying the board over money." Tyler screamed. "It is just money."
No.
I said. "It is not just money." I turned to Elena. "Play it."
Elena nodded.
She connected her laptop to the large monitor on the wall. "What is this?" the president asked, her voice trembling. "During the discovery phase of the investigation," I said, "my team subpoenaed the digital records from Uncle Dale's phone, as well as the cloud backups from the board group chat. We wanted to establish the timeline of the emotional abuse to support the restraining order." The screen flickered to life. It was the video from the graduation hall. The shaky footage showed the rows of empty chairs. It showed the dust motes dancing in the light. It showed me standing alone near the stage, looking at my watch, my face a mask of anxious hope. Then Uncle Dale's voice boomed from the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, a graduation with 0 guests." But the video didn't stop there. This was the raw file. This was the part one hadn't seen until my lawyer found it. After saying the line, Uncle Dale laughed. It wasn't a nervous laugh. It was a deep belly laugh. "Oh man," Dale's voice said on the recording. "That is pathetic. Wait until the guys at the party see this. Tyler is going to love it." The camera panned down on the screen. We could see Dale's thumb tapping on his phone. We could see him selecting the video file. We could see him sending it to a group chat named Tyler's Big Day. And then in the background of the video, which was still recording, a notification sound pinged. It was a text message coming into Dale's phone. Dale read it out loud, chuckling. Tyler says, "Keep filming her. We need a sob story to tell the investors so they feel sorry for the board and sign the check." The video ended. The screen went black. The silence in the conference room was absolute. It was heavier than the silence in the notary office. It was the silence of a coffin lid slamming shut. I looked at the president. Her mouth was open, but no sound came out. Her husband was staring at the table, his face the color of ash. They couldn't spin this. They couldn't say it was a misunderstanding. They couldn't say they loved the community. The recording proved that while I was waiting for them, terrified and lonely, they were not just ignoring me. They were weaponizing my pain. They were using my isolation as a marketing tool to scam investors. They were laughing at me. "You laughed," I said softly. I looked at Tyler. He wasn't shouting anymore. He looked sick. "You told him to keep filming." I said, "You wanted a sob story. You wanted to use my graduation, the moment I worked 2 years for, as a prop for your con." Tyler started, but his voice died in his throat. "I am not ruining your life, Tyler," I said, my voice steady and cold. "You ruined your life the moment you decided that I was not a neighbor but a resource. You ruined it when you signed my name, and you ruined it when you laughed." I turned to my lawyer. "I am done negotiating," I said. "I want the full judgment. I want the restitution order enforced by the court. If he defaults, he goes to jail. I want the credit bureaus notified of the judgment today. And I want the no-contact order to be permanent. 500 yards. No calls. No texts. No emails. If they contact me, they are in violation of a court order." "Agreed," Elena said. She slid the final papers across the table. "Sign here," she told them, "or we go to trial next week and I play that video for a jury." The president picked up the pen. Her hand was shaking so badly she could barely hold it. She didn't look at me. She signed. Her husband signed. He was weeping now, silent, ugly tears that garnered no sympathy from me. Tyler signed last. He looked at the paper for a long time. "I am sorry," he whispered. "No, you are not," I said. "You are just broke." I stood up. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't look back. I walked out of that conference room, and for the first time in 34 years, I didn't feel the weight of them dragging behind me. I felt weightless. 2 days later, on a Saturday evening, I stood in my apartment. It was clean. It was quiet, but it wasn't empty. The doorbell rang. I opened it to find neighbor Marlene standing there. She was holding a bottle of expensive champagne, the real kind, not the kind bought with stolen credit. Behind her was Sarah, a friend from my compliance team who had covered my shifts while I was fighting the war. And there was David, a guy from my study group who had texted me congratulations when no one else did. "We are here," Marlene announced, "for the commencement ceremony, but I already graduated," I said, smiling. "That was the academic graduation," Marlene said, stepping inside. "This is the life graduation. You just earned your master's in independence." We didn't rent a hall. We didn't hire a caterer. We ordered pizza from the best place in the city. We sat on my living room floor. We drank champagne out of mismatched mugs because I hadn't unpacked my wine glasses yet. We laughed, and it was real laughter. It wasn't the laughter of people trying to impress investors. It wasn't the cruel laughter of Uncle Dale. It was the warm, bubbling sound of people who actually liked each other. "Speech," Sarah yelled, raising her pizza crust. I stood up. I looked at them. 3 people. Just 3. But the room felt full. "To the ledger," I said, raising my mug. "May it always balance." "To the truth," Marlene added, clinking her mug against mine. Later that night, after they had left, I found the graduation gown. It was hanging in the back of my closet, still in the plastic bag. I hadn't looked at it since that day in the empty hall. I took it out. I ran my hand over the velvet hood. I thought about the girl who had stood in that room waiting for a board that never came. I felt a pang of sadness for her, but it was a distant sadness, like remembering a stranger. I took my phone out of my pocket. I walked over to the mirror. I put on the cap. I adjusted the tassel. I held the phone up, not horizontally like Uncle Dale, but vertically, framing myself perfectly in the center. I looked at my own reflection. My eyes were clear. My jaw was set. I looked strong. Not the kind of strong the president used to use to excuse her neglect. Real strength. The kind that comes from walking through fire and coming out holding the matches. I pressed the record button. "My name is Ava Thompson," I said to the camera. "I graduated with 0 guests, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me." I smiled. A real smile. Because the guest list was empty, I whispered, so I could finally fill it with people who deserved to be there. I stopped the recording. I didn't post it. I didn't send it to anyone. I saved it to a folder named My Life. I hung the gown back up. I turned off the lights. If they ever wanted to film my life again, they were going to be disappointed. The set was closed. The actors had been fired. From now on, I was the one holding the camera.